Welcome to this second session of Faith Groups for Lent 2022. As we explained during the homily, the first Sunday in Lent is always about the Gospel of the Temptations. In Mark, which we read last year, there is no detail. We only know that Jesus was tempted for 40 days by the devil. And then in Matthew and Luke, we get some detail about the temptations. One of the important things to see is that the Gospel indicates very clearly that after being filled with the Holy Spirit and after coming back from the Jordan, meaning coming back from his baptism, Jesus was tempted for 40 days. These 40 days are a reference to the 40 days that Moses spent in the mountain also before receiving the tablets of the law, the commandments, and also a reference, as we see in the first reading, to the 40 years of the people of Israel wandering in the desert, being tested in the desert. Because temptation, we know that the verb used for temptation is also tested. What first point we made in the homily that I think we need to repeat is that whatever happens to Jesus in this narrative, the temptations is something that God willed for him. It says that the Holy Spirit pushed him to the desert to be tempted. Coming back from the baptism in the Jordan, where Jesus has heard the voice from heaven saying, "You are my beloved child," I want to propose to you that the temptations of Jesus, the temptations that Jesus goes through, are temptations of identity. The devil will preface the temptations by saying, "If you are the Son of God," actually referring to his identity. And I want to reflect, I want to propose that we think about temptations, tests that we suffer ourselves against fulfillment of our own identity as human beings, as spouses, as definitely children of God, disciples of Jesus. Anything that is there in our life that we recognize as something that doesn't help us to fulfill our identity as what we are. Again, human beings, members of families, members of a community, disciples of Jesus, ultimately children, beloved children of God. The specific temptations of Jesus, one very clearly indicates that he was tempted by the devil on the issue of power. Jesus could have chosen to be a political messiah that he decided not to be. One temptation very clear also when the devil asks Jesus to turn a stone into bread. It could very well be that Jesus could have used his power to be a miracle worker, showing off his ability to do all these incredible things that we know he was able to do, or to give people bread, the basic need, to cover the basic need, where Jesus is about much more than that. The third temptation, Jesus answers, "You will not test God." So the devil is asking Jesus to test God's love for him. And how many times, if you live a life of commitment, imagine the life of Jesus, how many times he was tested on that, no? Or how many times we think, does really God exist? Does really God love me? How can these things happen to me? Or, there are many ways in which we could test the love of God. What we need to do, and what I think it's useful for us, is to look at these temptations, these powers, tensions in our life that bring us closer to the proximity of sin, that do not let us fulfill the identity, the person we are designed to be, the person that we could become, and look at them in our lives. For some people, it may be different things. I don't know how we experience the temptation of power. I don't know if we test the love of God and the love of others in our lives. Let me do something crazy to see if my parishioners would still love me, or if you are a husband or a wife, if my spouse would still love me, if he or she would, I don't know. Think about it. But what other temptations are there? One possibility, I was thinking, go through the list of deadly sins, and you could see if pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, sloth, or laziness, if there are temptations in our lives. They could be many. Again, things, tensions, ideologies, values in our life that really don't help us to become the person we are meant to become through this Lent. I hope that that we can do this. Part of what we do during Lent is to, what we believe is that if we look at our lives and we look at our temptations, the things that tempt us, things that become tests for us, then we may, just by acknowledging, we may be able to improve our life, which is part of what we do during Lent. To look inside, to do an exercise in introspection, and then to see, just by acknowledging these things, or by, once we acknowledge them, to be able to treat them, right? The whole issue of the observances of Lent, we have said also, are ways to combat these temptations we all have. The temptation of living without prayer, and or especially without the prayer that Jesus described in the gospel that we read on Ash Wednesday, the prayer of solitude, of silence. The temptation fought by fasting, the temptation of the self, of needing so much material things, the need to fulfill our every need and our every want in order to attain happiness through the wrong means. And the temptation of almsgiving, the temptation of the opposite of almsgiving, when we are not generous and when we think our life can be, and our faith can be lived without regard for the poor. This is the basic message, the core message of this first Sunday in Lent. And I invite you, by yourselves, or if you are with your family, with your spouse, or with a group, to reflect through the questions we will propose in the guide that you can access with this video. I hope you have a good discussion. I hope this reflection helps. And I will see you next Sunday for our third session. Next week's gospel is the Transfiguration, another great gospel to reflect about this, continue reflecting during this journey of Lent. Take care. Bye.